This is the Vision with Execution show. I'm Adam Torkildson. I'm an entrepreneur, founder, investor, father, husband, and I'm from the great state of Utah. This is where I'm hosting this podcast out of. And my guest today is somebody I just cold connected with on LinkedIn because he's got an interesting background that is similar in some ways to mine. And he's got his own company that he founded. And so I was like talking to people that have started something of their own, because that usually means they've got a vision and they've executed on it in some way. And that's why I named my show Vision with Execution. So Jamie Shanks is my guest today. He's the founder and CEO of GetLevrg, and we're going to talk to him today. So Jamie, thank you for being on my show today.
Adam, thank you so much for having me.
I'm going to read just a little bit off of your company's about page about you. It says, you almost lost a business due to unprofitable growth, and that led you to feel like a financial failure. And I totally get that. And then you had a pivot or a shift or inspiration that you recognize that talent costs are critical for growth, but also a financial anchor. And so you overcame some fears to think differently and how to scale profitably. So now you're leading a company that uses offshore talent, it looks like, to help your clients operate more efficiently and scale up more efficiently. And so GetLevrg is that company. If you want to take a second and maybe refine what I just said, or tell us what it is you would say GetLevrg is best at, what would you say?
We are best at providing an ability for customers, our customers are small to medium businesses, to unlock resource constraints that are happening in their go-to-market team, sales and marketing. Essentially, whether it's the founder who's doing sales and marketing to a chief revenue, chief marketing officer, or downstream into their onshore employees, we catch teammates doing $5 an hour tasks. Those $5 an hour tasks hurt the business two ways. That's preventing the team from focus on $500 an hour value creation. But especially at the employee level, you end up with disgruntled teammates. The teammates thought that they were going to work on fun and strategic things, and then now they're working in the minutia or the mud of the business, and they're really disenfranchised with this, and that leads to employee retention problems and churn. So our job is to bifurcate. There's those that are great at strategy, and that's your onshore team. That's you know, you're in Utah, you have your executive team, you come up with campaigns, strategies, and execution. But that average 45-year-old executive doesn't want to be editing things in HubSpot or editing a video or dealing with customer support tickets. That's what my team does. Execution best practices.
Awesome. And I love how you brought the word execution into that description. It works well with the name of my show. And one of the questions that I always ask my guests is, as the founder and the guy that's driving the vision for your company, GetLevrg, and this, I'm not going to ask this to only pigeonhole you into talking about the vision for the business if you don't want to, but most founders that I've ever talked to, they're really good at creating a vision of what they want to have accomplished and communicating that vision to their team, and also executing on it with the right people, with the right team. So my first question to you as my guest on the Vision with Execution show is, what is your vision for 2025?
The vision for 2025 is to go from obscurity to a micro brand in the market of a sales and marketing agency in North America, in which small to medium businesses start to look inwards, like we become a lighthouse to solving that resource constraint problem, and that so many companies around North America realize I didn't recognize there was an option to be able to staff up really incredible talent at a price I can actually afford as a small business owner. That's the goal. Now, what does that mean economically? Of course, we grew 10% compounded monthly growth since the day we started this business. Every month, 10% compounded growth, continuing on that trajectory. So that's, in fact, we want to probably grow more like 3 times faster than we grew even the year before, as we completed a minority investment from a private equity firm. So it is just hyperscale, getting out into the market and ensuring that the average small to medium business recognizes that all these bottlenecks and resource constraints that you have in sales and marketing can be tackled and turned on like a light switch.
Awesome. I love that you've been able to articulate that vision pretty clearly, it sounds like. And you've thought about that, all the things that impact how you're going to go on and execute it as well. So the very next question would be then, given that that's your vision, how are you planning on executing that into reality?
We are massive believers in EOS. We've kind of blended EOS with Franklin Covey's rocks.
What's EOS?
EOS is the Entrepreneur Operating System, written by Gino Wickman. There's a book called Traction, and it gives a framework of how entrepreneurs should manage their business. So there's some important documents that you end up using. One of them is called a Vision Traction Organizer. So you're reverse engineering your 5-year plan to a 1-year plan to a 90-day set of rocks, and this is where Franklin Covey's rocks blend into it. So what are the 3, 5, 7 things that you as the business in each department are working on to execute every 90 days? And the goal is that you just put your head down, and every 90 days, if you execute what you had on that list, and then the next 90 days you refresh and refresh, you'll wake up a few years later and you've walked so far up the mountain you can't believe it when you look backwards, but it's just because you put your head down and you did kind of 3 steps at a time. So long of the short is, following EOS, that plan is, from a tactile perspective, there is a massive plan in our own go-to-market that is an inbound and an outbound strategy to become a lighthouse and attract leads to us, not only through organic content marketing and paid media, but also a channel ecosystem of referrals. And then on the service delivery, it's just becoming excellent at the capabilities that we have so that we can master the art of customer retention. We're a 100% recurring revenue model. And when you're in a recurring revenue model, as long as you can maintain with a little bit of upsell and cross-sell into that customer base, it's like an ATM in your front yard. It starts to compound itself month over month. And so it's just becoming great at a few things, doing it over and over again, standard operating procedures and practice and training, being great at that execution. The overlying arch to all this is human capital and talent. We have a full-time HR department inside my business, where not only we have a talent acquisition strategy, but a talent retention strategy. Because my whole business is humans. We use humans, talent as a service, to serve our customers. So we have to be great at finding great talent, growing up and enabling that talent, and then being able to deploy that talent in our customers in a way that they're happy. So this is just like humans doing human things, and becoming really good at that.
Awesome. You're probably the best person I've had on my show who has been able to articulate the vision and the execution so seamlessly, and I can 100% tell.
I'm on stage a lot.
Yeah. I can tell not only have you said this several times, but also it's just kind of baked into your DNA at this point to think in this way, where you're not only creating something in your mind, but you've got a template for how to execute it. And I feel kind of stupid because I've heard the term EOS batted around a lot, never took the time to figure out what that meant. You just taught me something that I think is probably going to be something I'm going to start implementing in my own businesses, because it sounds incredible. And you never know what you don't know. And that's another awesome benefit of having people on my show. that I get to just ask them how they're doing things in their business. And I love learning stuff like this.
In EOS, one of the most important documents, if you have business partners and investors, there's another document called the Level 10. This one changed my life. I've owned 3 agencies, so I've been an entrepreneur almost my whole life. And you get better. Your agencies grow faster and you get better every time. Long of the short is I've always had business partners. In my first agency, we would interrupt each other with every harebrained scheme and idea every day. You'd come into the office and you'd be changing things up and shifting gears, and you'd be miscommunicating and voting and doing things in a silo. The concept of the Level 10 is that throughout the course of a 7-day sprint, every 7 days, you're just executing with your head down. And every time that you have a new idea, an initiative, an investment you want to make, a vote that is defined in your shareholders agreement that requires a vote, you put it on the Level 10 document. There's no change to the business for 7 days. And then you come to your Level 10 meeting. Ours happens to be Mondays at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard. I have 3 business partners and an investor. We come to that call and we go through that agenda. And it's only at that moment, it's what's your vote, what's your vote, what's your vote, resolution, move forward, don't move forward, what have you. And what it does is it allows everybody, the other partners of the firm, which are all working on different parts of the business, to focus with intent and not get distracted with what's called switching costs, like jumping from one idea to the next and one project to the next. You just do your thing for 7 days, you come together, you vote, and you move those things forward. Incredible framework.
And that's out of the EOS?
EOS framework, one of the documents called the Level 10.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds awesome. I currently do have a standing meeting with my business partners, but it's not a structured meeting. We're all sort of young enough to be in. 2 of my business partners, this is their first time being in a business partnership. They've always been employees of other people, and
we're used to interrupting people. It's like I did that intently, and I apologize.
Yeah.
I actually did that intently because as employees, you'd walk to somebody's cubicle or you'd walk into somebody's office. You're like, Johnny, I've got to do this thing. And you're always trying to wrangle the cats to get what you want. When you go into the owner's box, you've got to think differently. And that's where the Level 10 separates that out. And those new entrepreneurs recognize that every 7 days, no interruptions for 7 days, and then come together, vote, shift gears, move. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love, if I get nothing else out of this podcast, that I think is going to be incredibly important for my own business and anybody else who's listening to this. That's going to be a really good suggestion to look at that EOS framework. Just that one document alone, that seems like such a lot of value, and it's a very concrete way to think differently. Mm-hmm. You always hear when you become the CEO of a company you founded, you have to think differently. You can't think as the entrepreneur, wear all the hats. You do have to think differently. And I've always heard that, but this is the first time I've really heard someone say exactly how to do that. And for me, that's very important. If I understand a principle and I know how it's working, I can go and do it. It's so easy. So I appreciate that so much. Thank you. So I know we don't have a ton of time, but I would like to talk a little bit about some of the motivations in your life personally. I always bring up my family in most of my shows. I'm a very religious, conservative Christian, and that has an impact on everything I do. And a lot of my guests are of a similar mentality, but I really just like hearing what drives people in general. So I'd love to hear about whatever it is that's driving Jamie Shanks. What gets you up in the morning?
Now, there is the cliche that you're always trying to become the better version of yourself, but I find I'm more apt to remodeling myself than the average bear. Um, I'm willing to reinvent. I'm willing to experiment. I'm willing to, I call it, and I'm learning this concept called your relationship with. Um, and you can take some of your weaknesses and turn them into a strengths, such as financial acumen. In my first agency, we made millions and millions of dollars a year, yet somehow we almost went bankrupt through poor financial acumen. And that helped with the restructure of me looking at operating expenses, human capital being the most expensive one. That's where I began this journey 8 years ago around offshoring. The long of the short is, if you look back at my history as a kid, I grew up in an upper middle class. It's you know how you've got this concept relative poverty versus relative wealth, meaning the neighborhoods you live in.
Yeah.
I grew up in a great situation. Half my life in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. My home was at the backside of Canada's Olympic Park, so I skied after school. And then we moved to Ontario, to the capital, Ottawa, in a small town community where my house was on the Rideau River. So I came home from school, played hockey on the river, went skiing on the weekends. A true suburban life in an affluent neighborhood. So, but my parents were government workers who just were great with money, good savers. But my parents' friends were in the oil business from the days where my father was a geologist in the oil business, and I watched the creation of extreme wealth through those around in the oil business and financial advisory businesses and so forth. And so at a young age, I had an appetite to be, maybe I watched too much of the movie Wall Street or Boiler Room or whatever it was, but I wanted, there's that song by Bruno Mars, "You Want to Be a Millionaire So Effing Bad."
Yeah.
Like, that was me. And I started and I ran a million businesses as a kid. And I've heard that story on podcasts a lot, and a lot of entrepreneurs were also entrepreneurs as children. I was. I truly, every job you could imagine a kid could do, I've done it. And I was only an employee for a small portion of my life, and then I started my agencies. So what motivates me, I have an incredible family, 2 kids. I want to show them that I can be the best version of myself, that they could be super proud of their dad. Like, look at this guy who built all of this from scratch, right? While my parents helped me get a great education, they didn't hand me a house. They didn't hand me a car. They didn't hand me a trust fund. They just set me up for success, but everything else was created on my own, obviously with my wife. And so I think it's what motivates me and gets me out of bed is I'm 46 years old that feels like he has the energy of a 26-year-old. I want to run agencies into my 80s, a portfolio of them. So to me, I'm like I'm on the 7th hole or the 8th hole of business, and I'm kind of just getting the wrinkles out from a couple the ball smashed into the woods, but I've had a couple great 40-foot putts. And so I'm just kind of getting things going for the back nine.
Man, you brought in so many awesome analogies there. Golf, which is one of my favorite things to do.
And I hate golf.
Well, I won't hold that against you.
Yeah, it's a game for crazies.
I agree. And I fully believe I am kind of crazy. I think an entrepreneur kind of has to be able to have the drive to keep doing what they believe they can do, even when it looks like it shouldn't work ever. Yeah. You got to be kind of crazy.
I mean, as an entrepreneur, you will have far more no's and far more fails than successes. There's this concept, there's a million analogies to being an entrepreneur, but I remember, one of my very first jobs is I worked on the stock market in Canada at a bank. And there was this crazy stat when I worked there during the .com bust and boom of 2000, 2001. And it was something like, whether it was the NASDAQ, the TSX, the Toronto Stock Exchange, or the New York Stock Exchange, If you were to plot the 200 and some days that the New York Stock Exchange is open for the year, on average, there was something like only 10% of the days were big gains. The rest of it was like flat or down. But the big gains beat all the flat and downs by 4%, 5% every year. And that's what creates its growth. Entrepreneurship is exactly like that. In a course of a year, you're going to have like 5 to 10 big moments that create the compounded growth for the whole year. The rest of the time, it's like, what am I doing? All the way to, I can't believe this is my life. Like, bottom of the basement all the way to, anyways, you go through all those emotional highs and lows, but you try to, I use that saying from Tom Hanks, it too shall pass. Like every bad moment, you just realize is just a moment in time. You're like, you know what, tomorrow it'll be better. And then, no, this week or this month sucks, but don't worry, next month or next quarter. It's the only way you can talk yourself through it.
Yeah, that's entirely true. I believe that fully. And I love the concept of talking to yourself through things. My wife is a therapist, and I've got a background in, I'm sober 8 years from an addiction. So it means I've spent a lot of time thinking about my mental health. And the way I used to talk to myself compared to the way I do it now, it's like I'm a completely different person in a lot of ways.
I quit drinking a year ago, and it's amazing your positive self-talk as a net improves over the as you quit things like that. Yeah.
Well, I'm incredibly proud of the fact that you did that, by the way. And I know whereof you speak, and I've mentored and supported a lot of other people who are recovering addicts as well. It's one of the greatest things that I never knew would happen through that process, was being able to mentor other people through it. It's incredibly fulfilling. So I know you are likely going to have to jump off here soon, but I just want to tell you, this has been an awesome podcast for me. I hope the people who are listening to it get a lot of value out of it as well. You're a smart guy, I can tell. You put a lot of thought and intention behind what you're doing, and that's always respectable. And so I just, again, really appreciate the time you spent with me here today so much, Jamie.
Thank you so much for the invite.
So this has been the Vision with Execution show. My guest, Jamie Shanks, the founder and CEO of GetLevrg. And I hope you guys all have an awesome day.